Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Fintech, the training partner that demystifies fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. Owen Fitzgerald and I are back with another Money Talk segment this week. We take a deeper look at the startup ecosystem on this island we call home, then head south to Europe for a constructive look at the European Payments Initiative, and then head further south to Africa for the story of Chipper Cash and the fintech opportunity in Africa, along with a few more nuggets, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. How you doing tonight, pal?
Good, yeah, good. Having a good week. Enjoying the sunshine, or it's gone now. Enjoying the sun, working in the back garden. It's pretty good. Do you know what? I've had some really interesting conversations with clients this week. Some really exciting stuff going on. So it's always good to hear. Kind of gets you all pumped up.
It does. It does. Were you actually working in the back garden, like working, or doing gardening work in the back garden?
No. Doing work in the garden for startups. Yeah, so with the laptop.
Yeah.
Although I'm working on an old school Dell laptop, so it has to be plugged in at all times. So I can't go too far from like the back door.
Okay. The wonders of working for a government agency.
Exactly. But you know what? I'm nearly 5 years here, so after year 5, I'll get to swap it out for a new laptop.
Ooh.
So,
yeah, I might. I could tell a story about that, but I won't talk about that. But no, I'm a bit wrecked today. Let's see if we can lift these spirits up. I got my jab, my first COVID jab yesterday.
Oh yeah, saw that. How'd that go?
Yeah, that went well. It was a long wait to get in, but once you were in, they had a pianist in there, which was nice, and it all went swimmingly. And bumped into a friend on the way out, so it was all fine. But definitely tired yesterday, tired today.
Okay.
Got the Pfizer shot, so
okay.
We'll see how that goes. Hopefully, back in 3 weeks, and I'll be invincible.
That's it.
Awesome.
Be traveling again.
Yeah. We'll see. I feel like I'm. I was a little bit nervous yesterday driving around. I'm like, oh my God, I've been gone away from things for 4 hours. I've got to get stuff done. I'm actually in a car going somewhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, listen, big news this week. I think it was actually last week that Scale Ireland kicked off their membership drive. So Scale Ireland was set up probably about a year ago. It's Martina Fitzgerald, but not related to this Fitzgerald I'm talking to right here, who is running
aware of.
Yeah, well, you never know. It is Ireland after all. And Scale Ireland was led initially by the guys at Dogpatch Labs, Patrick Walsh, Liz McCarthy.
Brian Caulfield.
Yeah, Brian Caulfield, absolutely. And, Liz got it off the ground, and then they brought in a full-time CEO with some policy experience, being Martina. It just last week kicked off the membership drive. So Norio Ventures is now a proud member of Scale Ireland. Thank you. And I put the badge onto the Norio Ventures website. It took me way too long to do that yesterday, but I did. It's up there now, so everybody can see with a nice link to the website. So check it out. So Scale Ireland is an independent, not-for-profit organization. Their mission is to support, represent, and advocate on behalf of Irish tech startup and scale-up companies to create the most advantageous conditions for them to succeed. So the vision is to make Ireland a leading location for innovation and entrepreneurship. They are obviously promoting Irish tech startups and scale-ups. One of the things that kicked off a few months ago as well, kind of nearby all of this, is the new NDRC. We've talked about this before, right? It's Ireland's all-island national startup accelerator, and uniting the startup ecosystems in Dublin, in Galway, down in Kerry and Cork, up in the northwest, down in Waterford, and in the north up in Belfast. They've kicked off a few masterclasses. I've attended 3 of them. They've all been really good. So one on startup ecosystem, one on mentoring, one on angel investing. And what I saw in those classes very much is the NDRC aligning with obviously all of this makes sense being done together with Scale Ireland and the overall mission of growing Ireland into a top 10 startup ecosystem worldwide by the year 2030, right? So that's a big push, right? It's great to see all this happening.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And look, like we've talked about this before, the support that startups need, this is a great initiative for that. But as well as that, like there's all the great courses as part of the membership. There's obviously the masterclass courses being run in partnership with the NDRC. There's all of the benefits. There's, I think they have Stripe and teamwork and a number of really cool value add benefits that you get from the membership. But the bigger thing is the policy piece. We had Bradley Tusk on from the US way back when, and he's a VC who works specifically with regulated or trying to be regulated startups, and the value he brings from his policy and government background. That's his USP there, and that makes a huge difference. In the same way, what you need then is an organization supporting startups at an early stage, being their advocate in the policy space, and that's what's been lacking. Obviously, there's been great individuals, including the people involved with Scale Ireland, but even before that, trying to do their bit for Ireland as an ecosystem. But again, it had been all a bit disjointed, and people trying to do a lot on their own. This is a great way now to get all those people together, working in the same agenda and really driving that mission from an ecosystem point of view. So look, I think what they're doing is fantastic, and we hope to be able to get some of the guys on at some point in the next few weeks or months to talk about it in a bit more detail. But it is incredibly important to give that united voice in terms of getting out the support and trying to lobby with the government and getting the right supports in place in the country for startups.
Absolutely.
Really needed. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, rhetorically, a few years ago, this off the cuff remark from somebody that it was one of the government ministers said, listen, if I want to talk to the startup community, how do I talk to startups? It's like there was no single point organization or point person for this. And now we've got Scale Ireland for that, which is a great win. I think that, looking at this overall ambition to break the top 10, I actually did find a list where Ireland was already in the top 10. I forget which one it was, but in the startup rankings, Ireland's anywhere from 18 to 36, looking at a few of the different ones. Startup Blink, and we'll put the link into the show notes for this, had Ireland at number 18 for startup ecosystems. Startup Genome at number 36. The Startup Link 2020 report was particularly interesting because they said exactly what the whole mission of NDRC, and obviously NDRC and Scale Ireland are different things, but very much aligned in terms of ambition and where all this is going. And what the report said, to avoid a repeat in 2021, which was Ireland dropping 4 spots from 2019, Dublin dropping 10, no other Irish city in the top 300, Ireland needs to focus on building good momentum in Dublin while also making sure other Irish cities play a much more substantial role in the ecosystem, which is so true. And it's connecting the dots across Ireland between Dublin, Galway, I'll keep going, Limerick, Cork, Waterford, Kerry, up in the northwest, up in the northeast. Wonderful. Connect the dots, critically important. It makes a much bigger ecosystem. Lots to do, though, like you mentioned, the employee stock options, stumbling over that with a US VC just last week, right? And where it was like, really?
Yeah.
You guys have to deal with that? It's just not right. I won't get into the detail of it. Capital gains tax on exits for entrepreneurs are relatively harsh. There have been some improvements over the last few years with some coordinated policy activism or response going on, whatever you want to call it, to try to change some of this at the government level, but more needs to be done. And then overall, the government level prioritization of attracting top multinational corporations through one government body, and then versus supporting and attracting top entrepreneurs through another government body. Just getting that balance right, I think, is pretty important, right? Because there's 2 things to do there, right?
Yeah.
And it's creating that next Irish unicorn after Finergo. Finergo are now our latest Irish unicorn. So congrats to them. Interesting deal with Finergo, but we won't talk about that tonight. We'll talk about that another time. Anywho, remember, we are an island of 5 million people, always punching above its weight in terms of international business. So we are in a good place just to be having this conversation anyway with this small island that we all live on. But anywho, speaking of Irish startups, we had Sifted just recently, actually 27th of May, which was just last week. They put out an article called 18 Irish Startups to Watch According to Top VCs. And each one of them gave 3 or 4 different reference points. And I just wanted to run through some of those real quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Some really interesting names there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nicola McClafferty from Draper Esprit, she said WorkVivo, who are doing enterprise employee communications, Evervault, we're doing encryption for developers, and Open, which is ampersand Open, who are doing customer loyalty through gifting. I hear the WorkVivo name around, very familiar with Evervault, and Open, wasn't too familiar with them, but
It's raised a big round recently, I think.
Yeah, I missed that. So Those were the first three. The next one, this was Alan Merriman at Elkstone Partners. He talked about Tynes, which is doing workflow automation, Wayflyer, e-commerce business financing. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then Spotlight Oral Care. And I'm like, really? A toothpaste? So
It's dental hygiene.
dental hygiene, absolutely. I just thought, listen, looking at the Elkstone portfolio, and I'm just giving these guys a hard time, obviously. What about FlipDish, right? They've invested in FlipDish. FlipDish are their B2B SaaS that powers the food delivery websites of plenty of restaurants, takeaways, right? They're doing incredibly well over the last year, and I'd say watch out for them. But you know what? Alan may have a view on Spotlight Oral Care based upon, their growth, their profitability. Maybe they're knocking the ball out of the park. So, props to them if that's the case. Then we had Menno Axe. Speaking of NDRC, I know that he is managing the partnerships out with the VC community now at NDRC. So he had three good ones. Swig, which is interviewing Reimagine. I think they might have been in one of the latest cohorts. Were you familiar with Swig before, SWYG?
I haven't come across them at all.
Yeah. And then Bridge, which is intro automation. Shout out to Connor Murphy. I love Bridge. I'm a Bridge user. They're wonderful. Can't wait to see the monetization strategy for that because they deserve one, right? You can think about it a number of different ways. Just makes doing intros in business incredibly easy, and it just expands your network. It's kind of unbundling LinkedIn and doing really well with that. The third one was kind of like saying, can you tell me the name of a good beer in Ireland? It's like, well, of course, it's Guinness. It's like, can you tell me the name of probably the Irish startup with the biggest global potential right now? Of course, it's Mana Aero, right? They do drones, so that's Bobby Healy.
Yep.
Right?
They got I think they're the first drone company to be licensed in across Europe, I think, delivery, which is huge.
I just saw that. They are delivering from a pharmacy in Galway out to Oranmore, which is one of the suburbs of Galway. I think that's one of their first, well, we'll call it a pilot run, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Then we had Helen McBreen at Atlantic Bridge. She talked about Timpani Medical. Again, knew the name, wasn't overly familiar. Inclusio, same thing there. They do company culture metric tracking. Protex, which is computer vision for the workplace. Again, hadn't been familiar with them. And then Sedici, digital identity. Shout out to Dave Cunningham.
Yeah.
Very familiar with them and what they're doing. Speaking of Galway, obviously, shout out to all of Galway, where Dave Cunningham is, and Ollie Walsh, for that matter. Then we had Isabel O'Keefe from Sure Valley Ventures. She had Alien, news intelligence platform, which is an investment of our good friend Mike Brennan at Finch Capital. Boundless HR is a remote worker global payroll. Critically important right now. Lots of that going on.
Really interesting company. I'm familiar with Dee Coakley and the team there.
Oh, yes. I have heard of Dee Coakley. Absolutely. And then Get Visibility. So unstructured data management. I jumped when I looked at this one because their screen was like all fintech. I'm like, I haven't heard of these guys. And it's like, well, then you waited for the website to scroll once and it went to another industry and then another industry and then another industry. So it's unstructured data management across enterprise, right?
Yep.
And then finally, Finn Murphy at Frontline Ventures. He mentioned Inscribe.ai, anti-fraud document analysis, and then Mona.so/Quorum, chat-based customer comms. Didn't know either one of them.
Inscribe.ai I've come across,
Okay.
Interesting company there.
Finn's big thing is B2B SaaS. Those two are clearly B2B SaaS. And so good for them there. I thought they probably, I was kind of interested when I looked at this article. It was like, did they reach out to a whole bunch of folks? And these were the 6 that responded. Would love to hear the same from Mike Brennan at Finch Capital, like I mentioned. Maybe we will get him on the show. He does have a podcast voice.
He does.
He absolutely does. Shout out to Mike. Good pal. Known him for a long time. Patrick Pinchmid at Middle Game, right? Would love to hear his thoughts as well. Fellow American like myself. Middle Game Ventures set up here last year. And then ACT, right? Would love to get their thoughts. Connor Cantwell at Cosimo always tells it like it is, right? He's not going to gift wrap it for you. So we'd get some good data from him. And then, of course, Gianni Matera at Growing Capital, who also invested in FlipDish, but also GeoWalks, who are in Techstars right now. GeoWalks do kind of satellite imagery to be able to do your house valuation,
in
right?
The prop tech space,
yeah, pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I was going to ask. I know what my kind of top one out of the list would be, but I'd be interested to know what yours is of the list of those 18.
We're going to say the same thing.
Yeah,
you say it. I don't need to.
Wayflyer.
Yeah, tell us about Wayflyer, Owen.
Well, know the company a bit, obviously through my work. I just think it's a fascinating business. I mean, obviously they were in the papers last week they raised $76 million as a Series A and additional debt funding on top of it. Like huge potential. I mean, massive growth since they launched in only April last year. So what, 14 months, not even 14 months, and they're raising about a 76 million Series A. And obviously it's the equivalent of a merchant cash advance solution for e-commerce companies. So it's funding sales, but through, I suppose, the analysis of their card, the sales that they've done on their card through the card business. Really interesting company. But like I said, any of the interviews that read in terms of their raise, and like we mentioned, Patrick, their middle game, we're in the seed round. Like it's heavily focused on the ability on their data side to give the insights to the e-commerce firms on how they're spending on their marketing. And it's, absolutely killing it, clearly. So very exciting. And obviously COVID has massively impacted on the speed at which they've been able to grow the business, but it was going to happen anyway. It's just probably accelerated quicker than the guys would have even imagined. Aidan and Jack, I would love to have them on to talk about it in more detail. It's something I'd be familiar with in terms of building a kind of underwriting model for fast lending, but really interesting. And I think the sky's the limit for those guys. It's a space that's only going to get bigger. And the really interesting piece will be then what are the other products? How do you move upstream, if you want to call it that, in terms of your e-commerce clients? What are the additional products? Is it a card solution? Some sort of prepaid card solution? I don't know. So
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. And they were, just you can't help but think of Pipe in the US,
yeah,
right? And Pipe they provide financing for B2B SaaS companies, right?
yeah,
Because they know that, okay, if you have subscriptions for your software that are running now through the next year, right? Because you got someone
yeah,
on an annual discount, that's all going to come in, right?
yeah.
Provide financing based on that. It's almost like invoice
It's,
financing, but for B2B SaaS.
but
And
it is like, even when I was describing Wayflyer to people, I usually just say it's like invoice discounting, but for B2B SaaS
yeah,
companies. It seems like a very simple business or a simple offer, but obviously it's incredibly complicated in terms of being able to underwrite it. But at the same time, it's a huge opportunity.
yeah. And it's using data in new ways in order to, it's almost like data as collateral, right? Which is an interesting thought.
Do you know what? I saw a really interesting tweet or two. There was two things. I was listening to Invest Like the Best with Patrick O'Shaughnessy, and he had on the founder of Brex, whose name I cannot think of off the top of my head now, something. And Brex are the US credit card solution for startups. But he talked about, it's not static underwriting, it's constantly evolving. And then
Dynamic.
Simon Taylor, dynamic. There was a different word they used, but it was Simon Taylor, obviously from 11FS, had tweeted something similar during the week. And I did versions of that in Future Finance. But again, it's not a point in time. It's constantly evolving. And obviously you need to be able to run the data and assess the data in a particular way. And obviously with the likes of a Wayflyer or a Pipe where it's constant, it might be shorter loans, but they're being done over multiple days. They're being paid back very quickly. You need the ability then to assess them and underwrite them very quickly, constantly evolving models. So fascinating space to watch, I think.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I think, thinking about this whole list overall, lots of good names on there for founders to talk to, right? When they're
Yeah.
thinking about
Oh, yeah.
raising their round. And obviously, all these folks are investing at different stages, right? So that's one of
Yeah.
the most important things. If founders are looking at some of these Irish VCs here and saying, hey, write me a check, pal.
The great thing is, we were talking about, a selection is 6 or 7 VCs, and we mentioned a few others that people could talk to. There's 18 companies there, but a number of them have raised significant rounds, which
Yeah.
is fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to see, in very different ways and in very different sectors, which is great. And it only leads to more rounds and further focus on Ireland and the opportunities there. So
Absolutely. And for more, I just stumbled across something today. I tweeted this out earlier. Check out the awesome resource for founders seeking funding that is openvc.app, right? Steph put it together, and it is VC led. So if you're a VC, you need to put your details in there, but it is a one consolidated place where you can just put in your kind of startup in the country that you're in, and you get a list of VCs that are investing in that space, right? So it's a
yeah.
great starting point for founders that are doing the research. And a few folks that I know that are founders, I think that sent them scurrying today and looking at it. So it's good to see that happening. And this is not just, Ireland, obviously, this is across Europe at the very least. And I know probably into the US a bit more. But speaking of Europe, right, we missed this. It was about a month ago. But speaking of Finch Capital, it was in their newsletter that I just read today. It was a link to Europe's largest banks planning a joint attack on US payment giants. It's from a publication called Insider Voice. So, quoting Joachim Schmalzel, president of the European Payment Initiative, which it is, the EPI, the idea is to build a European payments champion that could take on PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, Google, and Apple. And I'm like, oh God, please, no. Right. I mean, I've missed this, and hopefully I did for the right reasons. And, wonderful that the good folks at Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas, UniCredit, Santander, all teaming up to do this, dare I say, so that their, senior level innovation folks and executives have a startup like project to work on, and then they can go back to their day jobs and still get their day job salaries and their bonuses, right? Which is wonderful that they get to do that. But I've seen the proposed models for people that are thinking way ahead of the game here, for central bank digital currency, derivations of that, like the regulated digital cash model from the Billen Group. Shout out to those guys. I know them well. So EPI, don't bother, right? It's just, unless you're teaming up with someone like Billen, you're thinking about how to do this truly digitally rather than just creating some type of payment app for people.
This seems like, it's obviously the horse is bolted here, but it just seems like a protectionist kind of move from the big banks. Could be wrong. Happy to be proven wrong, but it just seems like, they're eating our lunch. Let's all band together and stop them from doing it. But like, it's far too late.
Yeah. I did see something else today on some pan-European digital wallet, right? An identity wallet.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, that is potentially huge. It's a digital wallet identity solution that effectively allows you to passport your identity into other European countries, which would be genius in terms of, the problem, like the issue. If I was to move to France tomorrow and try open up bank accounts and stuff like that, I've no history. I can't transfer my insurance across jurisdictions, that sort of thing. Like that sort of stuff is the holy grail of, from an identity solution, being able to passport your identity and your driver's license and everything else across different jurisdictions easily. That'd be great. That's far more interesting. But again, the likelihood of all of the countries being able to band together and pull together a solution that works everywhere for everybody, you'd have to say it's unlikely to work out.
There are already things happening that will, supersede this eventually. And if this digital wallet thing teamed up with this payments initiative, they might be part of the way there. But if they're building it on old banking rails and MasterCard and Visa are already beyond that and haven't even gone truly digital yet into actually, I think probably both are messing around with CBDC models, central bank digital currency. So anyway. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat Fintech, demystifying fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. Pat Fintech enable financial services professionals to transform their capabilities into the digital age with dedicated virtual training programs geared towards those that can develop, deliver, and monitor optimally customized user experiences balanced by appropriate governance, control, and oversight. To learn more about Pat Fintech, go to moneyneversleeps.ie/PAT Fintech.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Heading south to Africa, Chipper Cash. Silicon Valley Bank led a $100 million investment in Africa's Chipper Cash, making it Africa's most valuable startup. I know you came across this one. Tell us about it.
Yeah, look, you mentioned, I've put it in the newsletter. I was given a presentation last week in Lithuania. I mean, in inverted commas, I was virtually in Lithuania to the European Business Network there. Really interesting. And I was doing my usual kind of spiel, which I had to update around, the driving forces for change. I do a presentation on trends. And prior to that, I talk about where we've come from and, this idea of a three-stream financial world, and Africa and the Southern Hemisphere is very mobile focused. And that's where a lot of the development and people living on $2 a day. So they don't have the traditional bank models or the bank products. They have more mobile phones and bank accounts in most countries, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of driver for a lot of the products and the solutions being offered in that market. So I was doing that, and I came across this article then or Chipper Cash as part of my kind of research for that. And then I saw obviously the announcement then. That was only this week, I believe. So look, really interesting. There's so much still to be done in the market. But I think in some ways it's the most innovative of the different jurisdictions, I suppose. You've got the legacy world of the US and the EU versus the digital first economy in Asia. But then everything is primarily mobile focused in Africa. So this one I thought was an interesting one because we obviously know what Pipit are doing and we're very familiar with. Shout out to Ollie there. But then everything is mobile focused, but then you have these real niche areas. I talk about niche. To use Nigeria as an example, it's the largest economy there.
Yeah.
In the sense that everything is mobile focused because you have like I said. 60% of Nigerians don't have a bank account, but then only 6% of them use mobile phones. So there's massive opportunity there still to bring people on using more mobile solutions. So it's a really interesting space to watch in terms of the different products and the different opportunities in the different countries.
That's interesting in that if only 6% of the population are using mobile phones to make financial transactions, I thought it was only 6% of the population had mobile phones, but that's not the case, right? So if it sounds like a big cash economy, right? 60% of Nigerians still do not have a bank account, right? Okay, great
Yep.
potential upside there. 6% of the population are using mobile phones to make financial transactions. You got a lot more way to go there to get them using financial
Yep.
apps. Great. Sounds like there's a huge amount of cash passing through hands there. And I think that's one of the reasons why Pipit and Ollie Walsh are obviously focused on that market. With Chipper Cash, obviously they're mainly B2C product, but they also have their B2B API and also a checkout app, which I thought was pretty interesting. They also let you invest in crypto and stocks, which is again interesting, giving a little bit of a Revolut feel to that. But this is completely dependent on being in this network of you've already left cash, right? Because if you're receiving cash, you need to be able to get that in somewhere. You need to be able to get that into the network somewhere. That's where Pipit comes in. But anyway,
look, a big investment round led by the likes of SVB. So, real validation on what they're doing. But I suppose alongside that, there's so far left to go in terms of innovation and financial products in Africa. And again, within the different countries as well, there's different kind of twists and turns to it. So
absolutely. And I perhaps ripe for Stripe and a potential acquisition there at some stage.
well, yeah, because obviously they've made a couple of acquisitions down there already.
Was it Paystack?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was it. Yeah, so a lot to be done.
What else? I know that I fed you a few good stories. What jumped out at you as being interesting?
Let's see. Another interesting one, I suppose, was Curve. It had the largest ever equity raise of almost 10 million sterling on Crowdcube. I suppose it was interesting given the volume that they'd raised. Really interesting product. I think there's still a long way to go with it. But at the same time, when you have, at this stage, when everyone has so many cards, it's a really interesting solution. And again, the beauty of crowdfunding is that they're able to go out to customers who are willing to back it.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
it's a good win for them. I would see them being an acquisition play for somebody who's looking to get into the card space. It's an interesting one. I really like what they're doing, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I stopped using them, not purposely, but it was just that they were the big gap filler for me because Bank of Ireland didn't have Apple Pay and Curve were doing that well. Curve was also integrated with Zero so that everything just went right through from my Curve card all the way through to Bank of Ireland, through to Zero, all the accounting for my business done on payments and spending. Boom. Curve pulls the plug on Zero. Bank of Ireland gets Apple Pay. Curve's usage, gone in my wallet. No longer there. But I was a very unique case. So with how I was using it. So there's a generation before me called millennials that have a different approach to using it. So I'll leave it to you guys.
Do you know what? I had a really good call with a client today, company I'm working with in the virtual card space, which I think is massive potential there. And I think, when you talk about Apple Pay and Google Pay and Samsung Pay, I just think I guess obviously the reason that the likes of Curve exists, and I know myself, I have a couple of cards in my wallet, but like really, I think we're just moving more and more with everything on mobile, and then opportunities like this company I'm working with, whereby they can just issue me a virtual debit card. Sometimes it can be a single use one, depending on who's issuing it or what it's for. I just think when a virtual debit card can be accepted at any terminal that accepts Apple or Samsung or Google Pay, why would I need cards as much then?
Yeah, I know. I think a lot of that is slipping away. But you know what? There's a lot of money to be made on the way out over the next few years. And I think these life cycles of a startup, a couple years to get yourself formulated and to get going from the very inception point, and then it's a 5-year run to get Series C. 95% of companies don't make it past Series C because they're either acquired or they fail, right? So there's plenty of runway left in the current financial rails and the way that things are done for a lot of these companies to make a lot of money.
Well, actually, your example, I think, it was interesting in terms of using Curve, because I actually think that the opportunity for card companies like Curve, is in the SME space.
Big time.
Guys who have to, and it relates back to what we were talking about with Wayflyer earlier in Pipe. It's like smaller businesses that have to generally pay by check, or they're trying to manage their cash flow. Like an integration into the likes of Zero and your accounting software that also integrates into your card solution to allow you then to pay things by card and track it, as opposed to issuing checks, or gives you the opportunity to get paid earlier than your 90 days. Like, there's so much opportunity there.
Oh, absolutely. The whole SME space is so underserved, and I think
Yeah.
we're almost overserved in saying that the SME segment is underserved, right? In that, Starling Bank have made a big play for this in the UK, and we're in a little funny place here in Ireland though with all that, because
Yeah.
do you know the whole reason that, well, actually Curve pulled their Zero integration because there weren't enough people using it and they didn't feel like they had it right. And I'm like, hey, it's perfect for me. It saved me a bunch of hours a month,
Yeah.
right? And then Zero went ahead and they pulled their Bank of Ireland integration. So Zero, and this wasn't Bank of Ireland's fault, this was Zero's
Yeah.
fault, because in order to take as an app, as a piece of software, either to take bank data from somebody or a business within Europe now, and also within the UK, because the PSD2 rules still stand there, you need to be what's called an account information service provider, or an AISP. And if you
Yeah.
don't get that regulatory registration, you can't feed people their bank data, even though they will willingly give you their permission to do so, right? So now I have to go onto the Bank of Ireland website, download an Excel file, right, in CSV, reformat that, play around with it, and upload it to Zero in order to get all of my accounting integration done. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's it. I think anyone who can conquer a lot of the integrations there in the SME space is on to something really special. And then if you can layer on funding and the different types of funding models like Pipe and Wayflyer and stuff, then sky's the limit with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Andrea Reynolds. With Swoop, who we had on the show a while back, Swoop Finance,
Yeah.
that a lot of these types of ideas are right there in their wheelhouse. And I think there's a lot that they will hopefully do with this space.
Yeah.
One thing that I really liked, this was from Chris Skinner. We haven't talked about Chris Skinner for a while. His writing over the last year during lockdown, during the pandemic, has been really entertaining. Some of the stuff that he's done has been, okay, dude, you got a lot of time on your hands. No more traveling, no more going to events, to speaking gigs, nothing. Anyway, he wrote a column today, "With great power comes great wealth," right? And he was talking about Spider-Man initially, right? Which is a play on the Spider-Man mantra of "with great power comes great responsibility." But he was talking about Saddam Hussein, Vladimir Putin, Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus of the Ryanair fame. And he said, when I look at Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, Nicolas Sarkozy, Benjamin Netanyahu, and many other leaders, we can see their web of deceit. The web is funded by greed and wealth to create more and more power, to create more and more wealth. It is a reason why politics is called politics. The term politics comes from the Latin poly, for many, and ticks, as in blood-sucking parasites.
Pretty sure the second part is not correct.
Pretty sure it's not. But you know what? That's the first time in a long time I laughed out loud at a Chris Skinner post, which was awesome. Shout out to Chris. He's a great guy. Anywho, listen, that was a good one.
Yeah.
We did last week, we did the FinSight series, going digital and banking and wealth management, with Rory Galvin. We did a snippet with him a few weeks ago in telling a few folks about the event. We had Brian Claggett from Movin'. We had Corey Habercorn from Salesforce along with Rory, and we had a great chat about going digital and banking and wealth management. So we'll get that up. Probably going to put a podcast episode out on that. We got the audio track. So shout out to those guys. That was a lot of fun to do that. Brian Claggett actually went to the lengths of saying, listen, we got to reintroduce some analog into these conversations. He put a frame up around a Zoom screen, which was an old school television with the knobs on it. Right, so it looked like you're looking at a television with Brian Claggett from speaking. So
brilliant.
And
brilliant.
Shout out to Sean Ward, good friend who introduced Brian and me a few weeks ago. So get to see him soon. Hopefully he's traveling over to Ireland. Good, funny story, totally unrelated. This will seem like a non sequitur, which is a funny term that Steve Ritter used with me last week when he got into a story about something unrelated to what he had just been talking about. And he said, this would seem like a bit of a non sequitur. When I listened back to it, I had just told a major non sequitur. jumping out of sequence, totally jumping out of
Yeah.
sequence. But anyway, listen, Sean Ward is coming over, and he said, I'm just going to be in Dublin for 1 or 2 nights. His buddy Rondo is going to be with him. They're coming off a golf trip, whatever. And he said, can you give me some ideas for hotels? And I said, well, what's your budget? He's like, well, it's only going to be 1 night, so let's do it in style. And I said, well, all right, check out the Shelburne, check out the Marriott. Those two. I met Bono in the Shelburne. I saw Slash coming out of the Marriott. He's like, oh, we're definitely going to Marriott. So, that's where things are these days. People in the, I'll just call it the 48 and up club, still try to, live vicariously through Slash rather than Bono, but I think they're probably about the same age right now. Just, I think one has more hair. Anyway, that was fun. So we got lots of outtakes that I think we've been recording recently, and we'll see if this one makes it in. With all these audiograms I've been doing, dude, I've got so much material for like a full episode now.
That's great.
But fun stuff. Anything else you wanted to mention?
No, that's kind of everything. I'm reading at the moment Atomic Habits, which I found fascinating. James Clear, he has a really good TED talk on it. So, this idea of compounding, getting 1% better every day. So, seeing how much of that I can bring into my daily life.
Aha. Compounding good habits.
Yeah. But he's talking about, that's just the way he kind of frames, changing your habits. And it's not like putting these big goals in place. It's, what one thing can I do today that'll set me on that journey, that sort of thing. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, I will check that out. I just finished To Sell Is Human by Daniel Pink, I think. It's a recommendation from Mick Sweeney we had in the show last year. That was really good. So the new ABCs of selling are not always be closing. It's attunement, buoyancy, and clarity. And it's not Alec Baldwin saying it either, on Glengarry Glen Ross. Any Glenn will do. Yeah. But, it was a good story. It was good, interesting. And I remembered that. So it was well written. It stuck with me. So thanks to Mick for recommending that. Anyway, dude, listen, we'll leave it here. I'm going to go get some post-COVID jab sleep and drink loads of water. Yeah. Have a good night.
Take it easy.
Adios. That does it for this week, folks. You can learn more about the stories we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. So check us out online and subscribe to our weekly Money Never Sleeps newsletter as well. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm the founding partner at Norio Ventures, and I'm an early-stage startup advisor and investor focused on fintech and digital assets. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, get in touch at pete@norioventures.com. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.